Young people aren't, because they know they're licked, so they want to get away so they won't get licked. It's something very simple. A concept of spirituality has nothing to do with spirituality, it has to do with concepts. That's a totally different subject. Science and chemistry is not a bunch of concepts of people about it. It's actuality.
Some people just don't feel they're capable of being spiritual. But
that again is a concept. Everything through our cutting our minds is concepts out of nowhere. Jesus said, "Unless you be as little children, yours is not the kingdom of heaven." Nobody wants to be simple. We want to do those complexities. All right, we got them. They want excitement. We got it. Well, why not? Respect to it.
But those concepts are real to them, and they get in their way.
No, concepts are real to lots of people, and that's their insanity.
It's just so hard to break them,
Of course it is. That's why we don't solve problems, because they solutions interfere with our concepts.
You like that? That's why we don't solve problems. The solutions get in the way of our concepts. I'm going to fast forward to one other part, trying to find one other part where Mershid is dictating to Murshid Wali, his esoteric secretary. There's Moinadine right there on the right, and Mansour on the left. This is in the upstairs of the mental garden. He's giving a WAPS class there. I'll outline it for you. Here we are dancing in front of the mental garden.
This time we have a Sufi choir.
That's out in Lake Nicasio, spring celebration. There he is, dancing with Taj there a minute ago. There it is. I'm still trying to get to my wall now. Here we go. So this is in the right next to the kitchen in the mentor garden. Well, that was me there.
It's very necessary to end the wholesale slaughter of human beings by other human beings under the asinine assumption that only by such methods can peace be brought to the world. One believes honestly and profoundly in the statement of the messenger of God that Allah loves His creation more than a mother loves her offspring.
Okay. Let's see here. I can't hear the question, I'm sorry.
Oh, is Dance to Glory going to be on the website?
We don't own it,
Oh.
so we don't have that. No. Someone see the word equinox? Thank you. Okay, so this is, Mershid has been leading the dances now for a few years. This is one of the first times where there's a really big crowd. He's invited by Yogi Bhajan to share in a festival in Golden Gate Park. I was in the East Coast that time, and when he came, I remember him telling me, he said, you know, it's one of the first times I've had a microphone with a large group of people, but he starts leading the dance, as you'll see in this scene, and then the interviewer from the Chronicle just starts talking to him, and he's leading the dance and giving an interview. It's very good. So again, quite fun to get I'm sorry, this Dominican wants me to use their wireless. There we go. Suave found this on the internet. I think we posted this on the Rouhaniat site. There's a Rouhaniat YouTube site, you can find it there. But what I'd like to do is ask Sierra to turn on the lights and invite Murshid Wali to come up to the playing chair there. You got to control it.
I remember this event very well. I was there.
Hold on. Okay.
You got me?
Yeah.
Okay, I remember this event. Because, you know, that was the day Murshid met Yogi Bhajan. And Yogi Bhajan, after all of this mishigash with the dances, and then, you know, the party didn't show, he has Murshid breaks away from this guy and says, Amin, and he gets people to start chanting, Sri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. You know, I was going to say to Shakur, where's the other robe? I sent 2 robes here. One of them was his Buddhist robe, and one of them was his the Sufi robe, and I don't see the Buddhist robe here. So I don't know what happened to it. It was in the same bag. But I'm sure you have it somewhere. The point being, Murshid was universal. You know, I mean, he had the greatest experience in the world in 1925 when he was on a long retreat. He thought he was going to die, and he had a total opening experience, and you know, he found God within. And you know, he'd had a hard family life, he'd been graced to meet Hazrat Inayat Khan, and Rabia Martin, and he was very moved by the fact that he was able to see the beauty, and it came out, and then all of a sudden the doors got unlocked, and he had visitation from Khwaja Khizr and a whole medley of saints. And in the end, he told the story to Hazrat Inayat Khan in 1926 and in an interview. Inayat Khan was very much ready to give everything up and go back to India at that point. He'd had a big disappointment in Europe. We'll go into all this in the book, you know, but what we wanted to do was tell a story of a human being who was a very unusual human being and who really lived a life that others can learn from. And probably his best friend was Paul Reps, who compiled Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. They both had the same Zen teacher, Nyogen Senzaki. If you want to read a most beautiful, beautiful meeting of 2 souls, read what Nyogen Senzaki wrote about his meeting with Hazrat Inayat Khan. Absolutely beautiful meeting of souls. They both entered into a samadhi together, and they became very close friends. And Murshid said it was Hazrat Inayat Khan that put him on the path of the Bodhisattva. You know, they became so close, and in fact, Pirzia just sent us a copy of an abstract for a dissertation that, or maybe it's a dissertation that's just been filed, or someone who's writing on the meeting of Hazrat Inayat Khan and Nyogen Senzaki in terms of why this was a landmark event and what it was, how they were able to come into such amazing agreement, even though you have, you know, on the one hand Zen Buddhism and on the other hand what he called Mohammedan Zen after his meeting with Hazrat Inayat Khan. Because they were so delighted that they had the same inner frame of reference. And so this lineage is very blessed from the beginning, having the blessing of both the Buddhist and the Sufi tracks, and the fact that the teachers in both accepted each other is monumental and very important for the history in our country. Hazrat Inayat Khan thought he could bring harmony between East and West through the power of music, and today we have more music than ever before. We're so happy our lineage has music. We're so happy it has dance. It's so happy it involves people saying the name of God and awakening the heart qualities. Murshid Sam's childhood was difficult. Let me just read what Paul Reps said about him. I interviewed him many years ago. It's kind of funny, you know, I've been writing this book for 40-something years in my mind. Right now we have a beautiful group of people working together, ferreting out things that nobody knew before about Mercer's life and his past and his ancestors and his commitments in the world. And, you know, I'm very grateful for the support that we receive from the community so that this process can go on and we can get these various birth and death certificates, and we can, you know, do what we need to do to support the staff to get it done. And it's happening beautifully. Mercer came to me at the beginning and said, "You write this thing," he said, "but I want you to get a lot of people involved, because by involving in them and putting the teacher in front of them, then they will have this experience of Fanafi Sheikh, of Fanafi Pir." And he said, "And I'll be known for that in this, as being someone who can continue to communicate." Here's what Rep said. Sam was a kind of prophet, a kind of Jewish prophet out of time, and there was no one to agree with him. His family didn't agree with him. Murshida didn't agree with him. Yet he had this inner light. So he just kept changing, but always from his own inner light. It was very nice to see. And I said to him, there was something behind him. Even when he made a bad impression, there was some force, protective. And Reb said, yeah, that force was his intent. His intent was pure. His intent was very pure. He was going to do people good. And this pure intent showed through, and no matter whether he scolded or didn't scold, it was this pure intent that couldn't help being helpful. But people didn't see that. And then I said, well, finally young people saw it, because they could see past the outside. And Rep said, sure. He was very pleased with what was happening. He'd walked away from Sufism because he said he'd become anti-Sufism. Same reason that Hazrat Kahn had said to Samuel Lewis, he said, I don't have as many loyal disciples as I have the fingers on one hand. There'd been a whole kind of organizational mishmash in taking over the Sufi movement, and he had gotten his feelings deeply hurt, and he was ready to go back to India, but his family persuaded him to come to America first because they were afraid he wouldn't come back. But then he came to America. He spent a good bit of time here. He went and he dedicated the land, the rock at would have been the Kaaba law, and that's how he proceeded. And Murshid Sam had been given the charge from Hazrat Kahn to be a leader in the Brotherhood movement. But you see, the one thing that had happened in the conveying of the message was that people weren't quite ready to do really deep esoteric practices to work on overcoming the false self and to enter the real self and in such a way to experience a kind of fana that was cleansing, and so that the real self, what Prophet Muhammad called the soul, is the activity of God. We are each one of us, and the main teaching of Sufism is unity, is oneness, is merging with that oneness. And yes, we're all part of the oneness, but we're asleep to it. And so how do you wake up to it? Sam never got tired of waking up to it. And when things didn't work, as Rep said, he would change his focus and he would continue. And he was very involved in the world. But he hadn't been supported by his family because, on the one hand, when he was reading the Bible by the time he was 2. He'd read the Bible 3 times by the time he was 6. He was in bar mitzvah class, and he caused a scene because the rabbi didn't like it, that he was acting like he thought he was the prophet Samuel or something. But the whole thing was that he had issues with the way that the religion had become so formalized and had lost the feeling of the prophets around the poor people, the people that had been taken advantage of. God was asking for that. And then you see that in Merchant's poetry and The Day of the Lord Cometh and so on. But this made a big impression on him. And also, you know, his family didn't support him going to school. He got into Berkeley, but he didn't go any further than that because they had plenty of money, but they didn't want to support him because they were alienated with him. So he didn't get the support from the family. He never got the bonding in the family. He had that wound that he had to address later in life. And so I want to tell that story of a human being that had to go through a lot. He came in with the knowledge of his previous lives, and he came in with a sense of his mission that was always alive. And but he was very impatient with people that just settled for a kind of a plateau. And they got to a certain place, it was comfortable, and they could just continue there. He was always challenging them, and that was his way of working, was to bring force, to bring power, to be of the group of mastery, which has to deal with circumstances. And you know, the way of the saint resigns herself or himself to conditions and sees God in everything. The master, as an activity of God, meets circumstances in order to bring them into a deeper alignment with the depth of the being of God. And that was Samuel Lewis's path. And he was recognized that way in Buddhism as being an emanation of Fudo, the aspect of the Buddha that will manifest in the hell worlds with light, you know, leaving no one out. So he had that, since he worked as a gardener, he had to make his own way. He brought seeds to other countries. He never lost touch with common people because he had to live with them. And so he never had the snobbery. He saw you know, what was wrong with just being wealthy and nothing else being important within his family. And then when he had the meeting with Inayat Khan, and Inayat Khan said that Rabbi Martin, whose picture is up here, who was his first disciple, who he'd already trained in the ways of the classical teachings of Sufism. He had her, he said, you know, yes, she will be my representative. You need to protect her. You protect the message, you know, because she has this important work to do, because he was ready to let the people in the movement just play their game. And if he came back to the U.S., he said, you know, I won't even get involved. You know, I'll have a place I'll meet with people. He was very offended by the way things had developed in that way. So he was putting Marshida Martin up in this way, and yet she had a very stormy personality. She was Jewish. She was been the youngest child, or almost the youngest child in an 8-children family. They'd come over in the gold rush, and she was stormy. She was always correcting people and always pushing, very pushy, sort of stormy person. And so I contacted to Samuel Lewis, and he got Paul Rips in at the same time. And he said, you know, I want you to promise you'll always support her and protect her, and don't let her defend herself in public, and don't let her defend herself in private, and don't let her get the family involved in the money side of things. But he said that's what Reps was referring to. He said, well, Marshida didn't agree with him, you know what I mean, because, you know, he couldn't stop her, and yet he was, and so Reps walked away. He said she couldn't be helped. He said, I thought I would do something of better value. But Samuel Lewis, being a person who would keep an oath forever, he stayed with her, and it made for a very interesting story. But I don't want to tell the whole story. I just want to say, you know, this is a very interesting person, and he had such a wide variety of things. And the first dances that we did, Yahai Yahak, he was bringing down the eternal qualities right into us. We were doing Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Earlier he said, you know, when I was in Pakistan, in the outlying regions, and or wherever he was, somewhere on his journey there, he'd been taken in, he'd entered in a meeting which turned out to be a bunch of communists that were you know, operating. Not long after that, they went into Afghanistan, and he realized, you know, that he could be sort of captured by them. And so he just sat there and said, Allah, 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 until they left him alone and he left. But he said he was in an argument with one of these people that, you know, is a Muslim in name, and he was criticizing everybody and doing the kinds of things that disturb people right now. And Mercer said to him, okay, he says, and we can continue this conversation, he says, but he says, in front of everything I say, I'm going to say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And I want you to say, if you can say what you say, and you say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which means in the name of the one who is all merciful and all compassionate, which every surah in the Quran begins with, you know, then we can continue this conversation. He said, but the guy couldn't do it. Could not do it. Could not bring this being of the all-loving, compassionate God out in that way. But I think people find a way in their egos to get very distant. And Murshid Sam was very connected with people. He worked as a gardener on the roads, growing things. When they built the end of the Bay Bridge down here to San Francisco, he was there. He was in charge of those workers down there working on the gardening there. When he got time, he would walk up to the postmaster of San Francisco's office, and he told his secretary, always let him in. He's a kind of a prophet, you know, and I can make my whole world stop, and we can go and we can talk about Lao Tzu and Confucius, and Sam knew everything. You know, Gavin Arthur said, you know, he was living next to him, and he said I would knock on the wall and ask him a question because he was quicker and more authoritative than the Encyclopedia Britannica, but he didn't think that was worth anything. He threw it all. You know, those were just concepts, you know. And you saw him in that interview acting very Zen-like, you know. Oh, people have trouble with this. Yeah, it's, you know, the concept of spirituality is not spirituality. It's a concept. It's another subject. Concepts get in the way of our solving problems. Total Zen view. Right after that, we go out there, you know, we're sitting in some lawn chairs, and Yogi Bhajan arrives, and so Merchant says to me, go over there, I want to meet him. Tell him to come over here and that I want to meet him. So I walk over there, and there's a whole group of people, you know, white turbans, white outfits. You know, Yogi Bhajan's just getting out of his limo, but there's this one fellow in a very nice suit, looking well-dressed, and he is giving Yogi Bhajan hell. He is criticizing him with every breath. He's kind of like a prize fighter who's in very good shape. Punch, Yogi Bhajan. Yogi, you sleep with your secretary. Yogi, your teaching is limited. Limited is perfect. Boom, no matter what he said, he bam, 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 bammed him with this criticism. And so I came up in the middle of all this. And I mean, Yogi was kind of like a heavyweight fighter, you know, getting hit punch after punch. And so I said, you know, Mercer Samuel Lewis is over here, we'd like to meet you. And so he jumped at the opportunity, and he started walking with me over to meet Sam, only then the fellow didn't give up. He had the most concentration of anybody I'd ever seen. You know, he was totally focused on him. He was not going to let go. And he went right, you know, so he just continued his diatribe of criticisms, you know. And so that's what happened. I brought this whole scene up, and all the, you know, the devotees are coming to it. And the reason Tawaba found the film was because, you know, in that interview that we didn't see all of, Mercer was criticizing the press, you know, about how they just stir things up and they don't really look for what was really going on. And then the next day in the Chronicle there was an article, you know, which I remembered as being just a total messed up thing. So I wanted her to find it, see if she could find the article, because, you know, I might want to mention it in the course of when we got there. And instead she found this film which was great. But to continue the story, then so Merchant is just kind of looking at this very bemused, you know. He can't get a word in edgewise. This is so unlike him, you know. And you know, he tries a couple of gamuts. The guy's, it's like he doesn't exist. You know, he's just pounding yogi. And so the merchant says, with the next criticism that comes out, he says, oh, to Yogi Bhajan, I had no idea how great you were. And then the guy criticizes him again, and he says, oh, I had no idea how great you were. And then he criticizes him again. Sam says, I think I have to get up and bow at your feet. And so he criticizes him again. So Sam gets up, and he bows down at his feet. And as he's doing this, it finally breaks this guy's concentration. And he turns to Sam and he says, you are an ass. To which Sam replies, hee-haw, hee-haw, hee-haw. He was done. That guy was done. He had nothing he could say. You know, you're an ass, hee-haw. You know, now he's lost his prey, and so he leaves, and then they make a great friendship, and they do a lot of things together, and you know, so that was the story behind the story, and I don't want to take any more time here. Just to say again how much I appreciate people's support of this work. We hope to get something in your hands in a few years. We're working really hard. I'm right now in the midst of a lot of organizational mishigash, and that's why I probably mentioned it. But the main thing to get is in unison with the will of God, we will to have peace. You know, Murshid was about bringing peace. He was about doing something. You know, the dances have been taken into all these places, into Russia, into lots of places before the Berlin Wall went down, and so on. So, in unison with the will of God is like saying peace is power. How do you have unison with the will of God without letting down your own controlling ego that is grasping and clinging and trying to make things that will please it, but unsatisfactorily so. And so to actually be in unison with the will of God, we have to lay down our own claim to have any power with this small ego, and instead feel the real self that is moving with this absolute peace of the one and only being. And you know, our role in the world is really to awaken the hearts, to awaken joy, to awaken the possibility of seeing more in people's religions than they saw before, and not to get confused by concepts. So I want to thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much,
And this robe, and these robes, Murshid always felt that they were a blessing, so you should not let them go by without just, you know, feeling, you know, some blessing from them. Put them on, wrap them around you.
Thank you, Wali. Thank you so much. And in the spring, we're going to start a new campaign, but I'm going to tell you about it now because you might get excited. We think, you know, generously, we need about $300,000 more to have everything covered. And so we have a campaign to get 300 people to pledge $1,000 over 3 years. So that means $333 a year. Now I know that's not possible for many of you, but for many of you, that's quite doable. Yeah, I can think that. 333 this year, 333 in 17 and 18, and we get 300 people, we're all done. Actually, I told the story the other day, and someone already is on it, so we only need 299. Okay, let's move the chairs and make some circles. Come on.